it starts with a story and that first footstep. You know, I always think about the first footstep I make. And will this first footstep on this walk today, where will that footstep take me?
That's Al Brydon, my studio guest today, as you and I walk together on the photo walks that we're making. And look at this, look at it. For my walk, there's no rain. Second week running, a photo walk in the dry, sounding dangerously like a Brit talking about the weather, Neil. But yeah, I'm sort of unnecessarily excited about the fact I've not had to bring a raincoat. Let me make a picture. I started out just a moment ago making some photographs of the crisscrossing of all the pylons along this particular walk. There's a lovely reflection in the river here. I'm along the river, shutter speed 1250 f4, ISO 160, reflection of the old warehouse that we often photograph along this stretch of the river. It's the first time I've walked along the river Kennet for months, maybe right in the midst of winter, just before everything really became drenched in terms of ground, and I couldn't go anywhere near the path that I'm treading now because it was flooded basically. So where do we start today's show? I think we'll start with a question. Have you ever stood in a gallery and tried to make sense of the exhibit label beneath a photograph or a painting and found yourself getting just a little bit irritated? These didactics, as they're officially called, often are written, it seems to me, in a sort of language that leaves me feeling, well, at best confused, at worst just a bit thick, actually, to use an unhealthy, unfair, cruel, perhaps, colloquialism about myself. I used to get a bit huffy, actually, at the didactics. It was like the curator of an exhibition had gone purposely out of their way to write the most pretentious, highfalutin nonsense that they could possibly dream up, possibly in the gallery bar, leaving me to wonder what all this arty-farty word soup was all about and whether I was actually worthy of the admission ticket in the first place. I call those moments my didactic moments. Try this one for size, just as an example. Untitled 2018. As shifting replicas become transformed through boundaried and personal practice, the viewer is left with a clue to the edges of our era. Now, I looked at that, broke it down into shorter pieces, and decided I'd have more chance of learning Mandarin in a week than understanding what those words, in any order, actually mean. But then a couple of months back, our good friend of the show, Jason Florio, who's co-leading India with us on the India 25 adventure, introduced me to, I think, a very important phrase. He said, "Don't try to understand it, just accept it." It was said to Jason by Aditya, his guide when he first landed in India while he was trying to make sense of the sort of wondrous assault to the senses that he felt as he stood in the middle of a busy Mumbai street scene for the very first time visiting that country. "Don't try to understand it," said Aditya, "just accept it." And I think I'll apply that to reading didactics from now on, and when trying to understand art and photography that previously I considered I wasn't somehow learned enough to appreciate. And actually, come on, Barnes. Barnes is with me today. Come on, Pups, this way. And actually, I think I'll also apply that to where I awkwardly found myself when I was preparing some questions for Al Brydon, the photographer, today's guest. When I was speaking to him earlier this week, I started to think, and this is probably saying more about me than anything, but I started to think, am I worthy of this interview? Can I do this? Is he going to be bored by the daft questions I may prepare for him? Because I've known of Al's work for a while now, through a few books and some magazine references, some articles, and the rediscovery of his Instagram grid. But Al, you see, Al Brydon is a very deep thinker, I think. You sense that immediately on his website and in his books. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to level here. That frightened me a bit. But he's also a walker. And many of his ideas for photo projects come from reacting with a camera to stuff that, well, frankly, just intrigues him. Doing that thing that we often talk about on this show, walking with a camera and just making some photos when you see something that you think, what's that about then? What's all that? And, well, I really like that. My own interest, an idea of just making pictures because you're intrigued by the stuff of the everyday, actually goes back to when I was first loosely studying photography and was sent out to photograph my neighbourhood by the tutor that we had at the time. It was I think it was the week's assignment. I was, and you may have heard this story, I was there in a park photographing a puddle by a bandstand. And I wanted to get what I saw was a very simple reflection, really, of said bandstand in this large puddle. I wasn't there making art. I wasn't being highfalutin or anything. I kind of just liked what I saw. And I was on my belly making this picture. No such thing as a flip-up screen on a Nikon F5 film camera in those days. And just as I was getting a couple of frames away, this guy on a bike rode really close to me, right by me, through the water, splashed everything, me included, the camera included. And as he rode off, obviously very pleased with himself, he looked over his shoulder and he shouted, "It's a puddle, mate." And I think now that there was a part of him that was a bit agitated by me being in the middle of the path, yes, for sure, but also a bigger part that probably didn't get that I was genuinely in my happy place trying to get a reflection of the bandstand in a puddle. I think he may have been having what I'm going to think of now as his didactic moment. And probably what he could have done with right then was a teacher reminding him of the fact that he didn't need to get what I was doing. Just accept the fact that there are people who do photography courses for whom laying face down on a wet path to photograph a reflection following a storm is actually perfectly normal. Anyway, back to Al Brydon. Al Brydon is a published photographer. He's exhibited around the world, and Al Brydon, well, he challenges me. I really do fall into his work. I really appreciate his photography, but I'm not always sure why. And I don't understand everything he says about it, not on his website anyway. He makes pictures of the flowers that graveyard cleaners have discarded in bins because they've gone past their looking nice date, I suppose. He walks and muses why and how nature will still be here when he's long gone. And he does that photographically. He made a film that has me wanting to make similar films of nature just moving slightly in the breeze. But his film was inspired by an experience he had with an alien big cat. But what I really do like is that I didn't, or actually don't need to understand why he makes his pictures or his more philosophical thoughts that I'm unable to muster myself about the why of a reservoir that's gone dry. All I really need to do is carry on enjoying his pictures for how they make me feel. The texture on them, the muted tones, and the intrigue that I think he finds when he's out walking on a path, just him, with his camera, that wonderful box in your hand that gives you your passport to curiosity.
Today on the Photo Walk.
When I'm making work, it's really the only time that my mind is utterly at peace. It is just absolute calm, and usually it's a bit chaotic up in the old brain box, and I like these little brief moments where I'm just the only person in the world. And that's what it's about for me, is that connection with someone for just an instant. I mean, what's more human than that connection. I'd find old bits of clay pipe, the pipes you smoke, little trinkets that someone dropped maybe 100 years ago. And again, it's that picking it up and that sudden connection with that person who dropped it. Any body of work, as we sort of mentioned before, just starts off by perhaps playing, just by doing it, just by noticing something that maybe someone else just hasn't noticed.
That's Al Brydon, my guest on the show today. And before I give you a flavour of today's mailbag, thank you to our Extra Milers and MPB who sponsor this show and help keep us here week on week. mpb.com is a website. You can safely buy and sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online. And here's how it works. You go online to mpb.com. You click the button at the top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading, and just follow the very easy instructions where you're prompted to enter the model name of what you're selling or trading and click a box for the appropriate condition. From there, somebody comes to your door to collect the kit, and then MPB, they pay you for your camera gear within days. Very, very easy. And here's a bonus. If your gear is in better condition than expected, they will automatically increase the amount you get paid. The average seller earns £700, and you can convert that into dollars and cents and goats per square inch every single time they sell to MPB. There's also a price commitment, which provides the right price up front, and they provide instant quotes that are guaranteed for 14 days. Plus, importantly, they will never add on hidden fees. I'll have a link on the show page today, or you can simply remember these three letters, MPB and then addon.com. It's a service I use, and I've been very happy with them for many years now. On the show today then, Corey Hovland updates us with his Route 66. Cue the song Adventure, where he's been making pictures in the places he last adventured with his mum's camera 38 years ago. Our friend Margaret Soraya thinks she may have found the best natural medicine that we all have access to. What would that be, Neil? I'll tell you in a while. Everyone's favourite American pirate, One-Elled Bill, reports in. Remember Bill? Yeah, he and his wife sold everything to go on an adventure in their RV. Well, he's found his way to Mexico. Dan Langer has found a tree that could tell a story or two from a time of the American Civil War. And Arno Dimling is walking on Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, and he has an idea for us. It's a sort of a relaunch of an idea in many respects. And it being the second Friday of the month, a street photographer and photography mentor, Valerie Jardin, is here with visual stories. This month we're talking about dogs. Turns out they can be a bit of a secret, not so secret tool for when it comes to asking for a portrait. Plus, there's a monthly question to Valerie too, which today is about cliché street scenes. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. Film or SD cards, yep, got those, check. And a hat, because for once, it's really sunny. Check. Let's walk. Welcome along as we make our photo walk, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, enjoying the letters and inspirational stories you've sent in, and listening back to special studio conversations with guests from around the world. And I usually would do this at the tail end of the show, but I want to share with you that last night I had a chat with a photographer called Ian Randall, who's going to be next week's guest. Now, let me read just one thing back that he said to me. It feels like I went to sleep, aged 39, and woke up 14 years later, aged 53. And in that time, Ian faced adversity that he will discuss in candid nature, I would say, next week. But now, despite and in spite of those adversities, he's changed his life entirely. And he's relaunched his working life, anyway, as the official photographer of one of England's oldest, very respected professional football clubs. It's not a story about football, though. Well, there's bits of football, clearly, but it's really more a story about his determination. And it all starts with a humble school portrait of his young children. It's quite an extraordinary story, I think. IMHO. Right, letters. Do you remember the letter from Corey Hovland, who I suppose, precinct his first letter, was taking time out from his job that was the cause of much anxiety in his family and personal life? Anyway, he was planning to travel down parts of Route 66 with his husband, daughter, and many rolls of black and white film. It had been a tough time for the family for all manner of reasons, as you'd have found out in that episode, but it included really wanting to spend more time with his daughter, who has autism. So it was a very important trip, and I'm pleased to say I have an update from the road tour from Corey. First and foremost, he says, "Thank you for sharing my previous email about the journey my family and I were looking forward to experiencing. While I could probably write a full-size novel about our incredible and personal healing road trip, I know you've only a limited amount of time on the show, so here goes. I want to share a short story about the journey, if you'll once again indulge me. Shortly before we began our trip, I was going through some old boxes, you see, to find some dividers for my camera bag, when I came across some old photo albums from my childhood. What a prize, Corey, I'd say. I love finding stuff like that. Oh, I forgot I had that. As I was looking through the images, I came across some photographs that I'd taken the first time I went to the Grand Canyon when I was around 9 years old. This brought back the memory of asking my mother if I could use her camera to take some pictures, as I didn't have a camera of my own. It was a tiny Kodak 110 pocket camera that had a cover that folded out and back so you could put it in your pocket without the lens getting dirty. I remember it very, very fondly. It was the photographs in these albums from this camera that made me realise that trip in 1986 must have been the birth, as it were, of my fascination for photography. Finding these photo albums just days before we packed up and hit the road, there was now the sudden realisation of an additional aspect to this important trip that made it even more special. I was now returning to the very place where it had all begun. In a time where I'm in a crisis of instability in my mental and emotional health, it was the perfect timing, and certainly made it seem though it was absolutely meant to be. Whilst I couldn't find the exact spots where I took the original photographs 38 years ago, it was still an emotional moment when we finally arrived. I stared out into the vast expanse, realising just how tiny and insignificant we are as humans in the grand pun scheme of things. I just started making photographs. The chaotic world of my job that's occupied my every moment and chipped away at my mental health slipped away as each time I put the camera to my eye during this vacation. But this moment felt particularly special. I look forward to sharing the pictures from the trip. Yours truly, Corey. Corey, you can't tease us like that. I need some pictures. I want to see some. I'm thoroughly looking forward to it. So yes, please, when you get a moment, Corey, share those pictures. In the meantime, I am going to share your Flickr on the show page today. The show page each week. If you haven't visited it yet, it's where we exhibit. Exhibit's probably the right word, particularly since on the Extra Mile this week we'll be talking about exhibitions and exhibiting your work. It's where we exhibit pictures that are sent in, stories that you've sent in, thoughts. Go to photowalk.show, the website, and you'll find all the pictures there. Oh, it's glorious today. It really is. It was a bit more industrial when we started the walk. That's for sure. You've probably heard stuff going on in the background, but I quite like that part of the walk because I noticed today this sort of crisscross, this meshing of industrial pylons and all sorts of stuff. Old bridges that are no longer used but are still spanning this river, the River Kennet. And I've just passed underneath a road, so you can loosely hear that in the background, but now I'm passing, look at this, field of sheeps and lambs or lamelettes. Hang on, some cyclists coming along. Let's move across to one side. This way, pups. This way, over here. Hiya. Morning, enjoy your ride. Morning. Now we're sort of meandering, we're winding our way through the countryside of this part of the walk. Let me get a picture. There's no industrial pylons to continue my theme. We've got nature's pylons, he says, getting moderately poetic. It's getting quite bright. Let's go for f5.6. I was asked the other day, do your apertures, the decisions you make, is there any sort of technical reason? I said, no, not really. It does depend, of course, how much I want to get in the foreground, midground and background in terms of the focal plane or in focus. But 1500 shutter speed, f5.6, 160 ISO. There we go. Beautiful tree along the path. Margaret Soraya was one of my guests recently on episode 429, the one called Photography Reset My Life. It was Margaret and Emily Renier on that episode. I think it was a particularly powerful episode, actually. We talked about all manner of creative things, writing, photography, of course, and sound. And I received this a couple of nights ago from Margaret. Hi, Neil. Amongst my bits of writing that are everywhere, I came across this. Unsure if it's a quote or something I wrote or heard, but I thought you'd like it. Anyone who is sound sensitive will find it hard to unwind in an urban environment. And I think that's very true. I know I've got friends of mine that live in the city, live up in the smoke, who do say they find it hard to sleep when they escape to the countryside. I need an articulated wagon. I need some noise. I need traffic. I need aircraft. But no, in the great scheme of things, I entirely agree. It is a great way to unwind. Being in the countryside, that is. Joshua Smythe, says Margaret, is a behavioural psychologist, and he suspects that soundscapes can actually be medicine. Natural sounds, with birdsong in particular. He says it's like taking a pill. You can prescribe sounds or a walk in the park in very much the same way that we prescribe exercise. Do it for 20 minutes a day as a lifetime approach, or you can do it as an acute stress prevention. When you're stressed out, go to a quiet place. Absolutely agree. You'll get no argument from me on this one, Margaret. Being surrounded by trees, plants and wildlife it certainly does evoke a connection with the natural world. You mix sound into that, as you're suggesting. Perfect marriage, I would say. There's a real rhythm, I think, to sound in nature, and I know it can reduce blood pressure, lower your heart rate, and I even read recently that it improves immune function. Perhaps a photo walk is really like meditation, although there's the Pinstriped Express. It's just to take the silence away for a second. They're all squeezed up against the windows. Oh, that sounds a bit cruel. It's not supposed to sound. That did sound disingenuous. I was teasing. Right, to my guest today, Al Brydon. I've introduced you to him at the start of the show, so I'll not need to say too much more. I like the fact too that he's found peace by walking and walking with his camera. It is his vocation, yes, but I think, as you're about to find out, it's so much more than that. Here is part one of a two-part conversation today with the incredible photographer, I think, Al Brydon.
Al, I was taken by 10 words in your About section on your website, mainly because I think in my career I have earned 10 words too. Mine are, I expected you to be much larger and maybe shorter. Seems to be something said to me. But the first impressions of a voice, I suppose. But your 10 words, he is less tall than he seems on the internet.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm looking at you now thinking, what is he? Is he 5'10", 5'8", 5'11"?
We'll never know. We'll never know. Like asking someone their age, I'm not shy. I'm a bit of a short ass, if I'm honest. Only a minuscule man, but at least my feet reach the floor, and that's all that matters, isn't it?
You put that in just for people to say, what on earth does he mean by that?
I think it's probably me being slightly contrary, but also I've always never really enjoyed writing bios, if I'm honest. So I thought, what's the silliest thing I can put on there? I figured if people want to know about, to be fair, underneath I think I've put whatever achievements I've managed over the last few years.
I think British people like silliness, though. Otherwise,
most likely, of course we do.
We wouldn't have had the goons and stuff like that. Now, I look hard at your work. I'm really drawn by the subjects and discussions. Though I'll be honest, I did moot this before we turned on the red light, as it were. There's a sort of esoteric feel that made me think, maybe I won't be armed with the right kind of conversation for a thinker like Al Brydon. Because there's a level of philosophy behind the work that you do. And these series of studies, they deal with mortality, your own mortality, quietness. The bit you wrote about your friend was really moving. I know that's not necessarily a series of work, but it's important nonetheless, the landscape. Yeah. But then I spied a sentence when you were describing the series called Utterings That Can Be Safely Ignored.
Yes.
A post almost 2 years old to the day in which you say, when I make work, I really don't think about it too much because I've got the rest of my life to think about it. And it appears to me that you make just because you can.
I have to make work. I mean, I'm not good at anything else. I'm really not. It's so intrinsically linked and connected with my existence to utilize this box to express myself. Yeah. I never realized, it took me a long time to realize I could express myself with this device. If I was able to paint, I'd be carting an easel and a smock, no doubt, around the hills. But as it turns out, I'm not a good painter. I'm not a particularly good drawer, but I was introduced to photography in a serious way, I suppose, when I went to art college. And that time-old cliche where, that everyone seems to sort of roll out about perhaps seeing the print come up in the developer the first time you utilize a darkroom. And I know it's cliche, but nevertheless, it's a truism.
I think it's a truism, yeah.
Yeah, completely, yeah. I liked, for the first time ever, I made a photograph and I developed the film myself, under tutelage. Yeah. And then I was able to go into a darkroom and watch this image that I'd made maybe a week or so previously appear. And that was that to me was and I like being the darkroom. I'm not a good photo printer, if I'm honest. I'm not very good at it, but I found myself really, really engaging with the darkroom as a space. I liked the red light. I liked the smell of the chemicals. Yeah. It was just a really calming place for me to be. I would go to college in the morning. Especially during the winter, you'd arrive more or less in the dark, and you spend all day in the dark. And when you left in the dark. And I like that, sort of vitamin D, I was in dire need of vitamin D, no doubt, all the time. But that was the beginning of it, really. I mean, there were cameras at home when I was a kid, but they were just used to record. My mother had like a 35mm compact camera that would be brought out on birthdays or at Easter or Christmas. And so you'd have this year on a sort of 35mm, 36 exposure sort of roll of film. So I was always aware of them as a device, but I never made the connection that it was something I could use to express myself or understand the world or try and be understood, perhaps.
You have a son. I have two sons.
I do.
I don't know if you've tried to do this with your son. I don't know how old your son is, but I have tried at times to introduce them both to the idea of a gallery of. Because I never did that sort of thing as a child. I think I might have enjoyed it. I mean, I got. I'm going to use the word dragged advisedly. Dragged around National Trust properties, thinking, what on earth has this got to do with anything I might be interested in? Only later to realise, do you know what? These great sprawling properties, which are really kind of weird in places, the English aristocracy, were part of my education.
Yeah, of course.
I wish they'd have dragged me round a few more art galleries and photographic galleries.
Yeah, I think that would have been lovely. But you know, my parents, they were of a generation and that probably didn't do that themselves when they were children. They certainly didn't. I'm not saying they didn't take me to museums and things. I remember going to museums as a child, but you know, in terms of art, there were no art books around the house. I didn't know what a photo book was till I went to university. I just didn't know they existed. It wasn't part of my growing up. I mean, I hear a lot sort of when I listen to people talk about how they got into photography, they tend to say, oh, my father or my mother gave me a camera and took us here and took us there. But my childhood really, really wasn't like that, you know, and especially before I went to college, which is where I really started to understand this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. You know, I was very certain that I wanted to create things.
I think we both grew up in sort of similar circumstances, not necessarily going around the museums, etc. But you
But you enjoy these things retrospectively.
Oh yeah.
So when I go out with my boy, you know, he moans if I drag him out into the wilderness, and he moans and moans. I always tell him, "You'll thank me for this." Yeah. Maybe you might not. I don't know. You may not. I'm perhaps being presumptuous, but hopefully he's engaging with something. When he was born, I just used to strap him onto my back. And, you know, as an infant, I would take him out with me and I'd, you know, make work. Yeah. I like that, you know, I like that. I just thought about the sound. Yeah, okay, he won't remember it, but the sights and the smells and the sounds.
Oh, yeah, very much. Yeah.
Done something, you know, zipped it. But he's got no interest in what I do. And he certainly hasn't got an interest in photography other than making photographs with his phone, you know, just as a record, much like my mother would have done all those years ago. So when I take my boy out, he moans and moans and moans. But I like to think that, much like you've just described, thinking about where how your parents took you out to these places, and you said it with a smile on your face, and hopefully he'll potentially do the same.
Yeah. I mean, the times we spent, they were members of the RSPB, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, and we spent a long time in bird hides. But it's funny, I now I can remember that smell, and
sure.
There's definitely a romanticism attached to it. You describe photography as a compulsion, both a blessing and a curse. What's the blessing bit? What's the curse?
No, the blessing's been just literally being able to do it. When I'm making work, it's really the only time that my mind is utterly at peace. Yeah. You know, I don't like to say, I've perhaps talked about it before. I really don't think when I'm making work. It's the before and after I start to think about, perhaps. So you know, when I'm making work, it is just absolute calm, and usually it's a bit chaotic up in the old brain box. And I like these little brief moments where I'm just the only person in the world. I also listen to music when I make work as well, so it's like sort of deeper level of immersion. So I'm really, really sort of insular and just in the moment. And I suppose what we would call it nowadays is mindfulness, isn't it? I don't have a lot of that in my life, but when I really notice it when I'm making photographs, that's when I'm making. But the downside, I suppose, to photography, I think there's a natural oscillation when you live a creative life. There's always going to be high bits and then the massive, massive low bits where things perhaps aren't working. You know, I went through, I think, most of last year not really making work that I was particularly happy with. And then suddenly, out of the blue, for whatever reason, I was out one day and something just clicked, like it tends to do. And also the curse, I suppose, is I always only just feel like I'm just starting. I always feel like I'm just getting going. And there's never enough time. You know, we have this finite amount of time. And I think living creatively, you're never going to have enough time to do every little piece of work you want to do. There's no end. There's no retirement from this. There's no end in theory.
But I think that's a good thing as well, by the way, Al. I quite enjoy the fact that, you know, I won't be tending to my roses. So I'll be still doing this.
Of course not. But at the same time, if we were being cynical and looking at it this way, you know, I think getting to the end of our lives, that there'll be that, I think, quite natural regret that we didn't do perhaps a little more, even if we burned ourselves out. And, you know, I know I've worked hard, but I'll be lying on my deathbed thinking, damn, I just could have done a little bit more, maybe. Wow. I don't know if that's true. I'll find out at some point. You know, it's like mourning mourning something that's past, while at the same time trying to look ahead at the next thing that's coming, while allowing the thing that's past to influence the subsequent work that you're making, if that makes any sense at all.
Well, so do you still feel you don't quite understand it then? Are you still in that?
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah,
right.
I'm constantly questioning and constantly questioning myself.
Hard on yourself, by the sound of it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about. Yeah, I'm told I'm hard on myself. It's because it's not easy. I don't find it particularly easy to do this. It's. I don't think it should be easy. I like to push myself, and I like to question why I'm doing something. I feel that the constant questioning propels me forwards a little bit. I suppose what's the constant in this? The constant's the photographic act itself, whereas I change, and the world's obviously fluid, and people are fluid too. And I suppose the photography, the actual act of photographing, is the anchor point, which I cling on to, and everything else is in motion. There's so many reasons to photograph, and I guess my reasons are as valid as anyone else's reasons to photograph. I guess we're trying to be understood by someone else, and to make a connection with someone else via this 2D rendering of something I've seen. And that's what it's about for me, is that connection with someone for just an instant. I mean, what's more human than that connection? And if I can connect with someone through a photograph, I'm not saying a photograph of mine could change the world, but if I can make a connection with someone, then, especially now through the usage of social media, I'm able to do that with anyone who has access to the internet on the planet. And I think that's an incredibly big thing, but it's also a very daunting thing for me as well, because as soon as you put work out there, then people want to know why you've done it. And I don't always have an answer for that at first.
Well, you're a prolific walker by what I see on your website and Instagram, which instantly appealed to my love of making work from what I find along my treks. And it seems many of your series, your projects, don't necessarily have a predetermined thought process in terms of title. You photograph as you go, and you find things, and you see them, and you enjoy them, or you question them. Does that mean you've got 100 projects on the go at any one time, or do you?
I have quite a few on the go.
or are you able to dig deep into a series once you've started one and concentrate on that? Because as creatives, that can be the one thing I find. A great generalism here, that I'm an ideas merchant. Sure. I have 100 things that I'm thinking, I could do that, this, and this, and that, which comes back to the blessing and the curse thing, probably.
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, I suppose I find myself having sort of maybe 2 or 3 projects on the go at once. And depending on, numerous things, depending on how I feel, I think largely or what I feel like doing, I quite naturally dip in and out of them without any real problems. Occasionally when one really, really sort of gets going, I'll really concentrate on it, really, as you say, dig deep and really sort of work at it. It happens quite naturally. I really don't try and force it. If one begins to take precedence, then that's absolutely fine. And I have many bodies of work that have just quite naturally fallen by the wayside and haven't become anything, and that's absolutely fine. I like that, kind of like that, this litany of failures. But if you don't make the mistakes, I think you have to go out and make these mistakes, because it tends to, for me at least, it tends to help formulate new ideas or the possibility of new work. It's just about starting and just about playing. It all starts with a personal story, and whether or not that personal story becomes enmeshed in the work, I don't know. It's in there somewhere, but I don't necessarily need to tell people what that is, and people don't necessarily need to care what that is. It starts with a story and that first footstep. I always think about the first footstep I make, and will this first footstep on this walk today, where will that footstep take me? And you could say that about every footstep you ever made. I mean, every footstep I've ever made has brought me here to talking to you now, or whatever life event you want to think about. It's all about starting. And I believe in starts, make the work just reactively, very reactively, in fact. I go out and I walk and I start to make work. And if it goes somewhere, it happens quite naturally. And it starts with that footprint. It's like, sometimes when you're out for a walk and you just do a sort of there and back, and occasionally if it's a muddy day and there's loads of mud on the floor, and you see the footprints you made an hour previously. I really like seeing that. It's like a physical reminder of the passage of time. And it's like the skeleton of the walk, the skeleton of the walk, to mark its passing into the sort of void, to be utterly forgotten.
I've never thought of it that way. The skeleton of a walk.
The skeleton of a walk.
That's amazing.
I don't know about that.
No,
I genuinely don't know about that.
In terms of personal work, we were chatting only a couple of weeks ago about last things we do without knowing it at the time. And this is why your project, when it came up, I thought, it's one of those moments where I thought, wow, I've just been talking about that. And here's Al Brydon in a different context talking about something. But the two connect. And for me, it was trying to work out when I read for my boys a book at bedtime without knowing it would be the last time I ever did so. It was that.
Yeah, that's a heartbreaker, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but I wouldn't have known it at the time.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have known that the next day they would be, I don't know, somehow become TikTok-fied or whatever they just didn't want me to read a book anymore.
Yeah.
That Daddy, would you sit on the beanbag and read a story thing?
I understand that.
One day went. I don't know when, and I wouldn't have known at the time that it would be the last time. If you knew, how would you do it differently? Would be my questions. But for the work As We Wander, you question about the fact that one day you'll make the last photograph you'll ever make. I was fascinated. The shutter will fire for the last time. What will be the last photograph you ever make? Will it mean something? It's something you've been pondering over, it seems, as you wander, as the series is called. Does that come across your mind as you work very often? I suspect it probably does.
Well, I suppose so. I mean, I don't. You see, I'm not a particularly miserable man. No,
I wasn't thinking that. I'm not.
I don't like to do. But I do think about endings, which is. I mean, we get a lifetime like everyone else. That's what we get. Everyone gets a lifetime, and some of it's some are shorter than others, and others are longer than others, and good things and bad things happen. But I did get to thinking at this particular time, there obviously will be the last photograph I ever make, and to 99% of the world, no one's going to care. No one will care about that. It's fine. Like you said, I mean, my son won't hold my hand anymore, and I thought about that recently. He's growing up now, and occasionally, very occasionally now, he'll perhaps take my arm, but he won't walk along the street holding my hand anymore. No. Damn, I miss that, And it's mourning for the past, but loving what the future is delivering. But obviously, the As We Wander work, that was made with this premise that there will be the last photograph I ever make. And when I was making the work, I was thinking, well, in theory, this could be the last photograph I ever make. It may well be. I don't know. And there will be one. And I suppose in a way, what it does, it helps me continue to make work. The fact that we have this arbitrary amount of time. I think death quite naturally manifests itself in photography. I've said this before in a few sort of talks, but I sort of think of photographs occasionally as a copy of the death of a moment. It's that one moment that has passed, except we've managed to make a copy of it in its basic form. Whether or not that photograph has any deeper meaning, I suppose, is up to whoever made it or the viewer. But I like to think, obviously within those photographs, there's layers to photographs. It's up to the individual to dig as deep as they want or are able. There's no right or wrong way to look at a photograph. It's just, you can only bring your own ideas to bear upon a photograph. I mean, when we're out making work, how we feel, I often think, must have an influence on what we're photographing or how we're looking at the world.
Definitely.
It has to. So if you're working on a long-term body of work, perhaps, like As We Wander, I'm not going to feel the same every time I go out to make photographs for this body of work. It's completely up and down. It's like I was told that the ancient Egyptians used to think that they projected the world out of their own eyes rather than received it. Don't quote me on this. I always say don't quote me because I could be making that could be a dream.
That's a fascinating concept.
Yeah. Well, I like that idea. It's this projection. So when I'm out looking, am I projecting and am I photographing whatever's bouncing back? I don't know. Maybe. But I'm wondering what's there beyond that projection. What happens if I shut that projection off? And maybe that's what I want to photograph. the subsequent image is almost like a byproduct of that giving of yourself to the world. And, photography's got a very punchy terminology. We shoot and we take. And I think it's the essence of giving yourself and sort of surrendering to whatever you're stood in front of that makes any final image enmeshed with deeper reasons for creation. No matter what photograph you're taking, there's going to be some of you buried in that, enmeshed in it, infused within it, in this 2D copy of a death of a moment.
And Al Brydon returns soon for part 2 of his conversation today. I'm getting my usual summer envy for barge life, seeing the barges along here thinking, there's a podcast in that. Barge walk, no, that's not right. Barging, no, that sounds a bit fierce. I don't know. Barge life, as probably one called that, I'm sure. But I see barges and I think, that's the life. It's not quite that's the life in the winter time, I'm sure. There's another pinstriped pups going past. That one's coming back from London, completely empty. Look at that, one person. What's that, 1, 2, 3 coaches, 4 coaches, one person. I just thought I'd mention, having read you a notette from Margaret Soraya, that it's wonderful to hear from you, not just with your longer stories where you're walking with your photographs, but also stories of short stories or short thoughts, notes such as what Margaret sent in. If you have any thoughts about photography, where it takes you, and how it makes you feel, then do send those in as well, as Margaret did. stories@photowalk.show. If you are sending pictures, a reminder that 2,500 pixels is the width that we resize. I say we loosely. Because Barney's not doing it, that's for sure. I resize to in terms of image optimization for the website. So if you can optimize your pictures to 2,500 pixels wide, fantastic. You're an absolute star. If you can't, don't worry. Will you do the heavy lifting, Neil? I will do the heavy lifting. And how good was it to catch up with Corey's story of the road trip as the first letter of the show today? So it seems apposite, actually, if not a little delayed, to read you this letter that was sent in February. I should have done the maths to bring this up to date. I'll let you do that, because we're in May already. Bill, with one L. I always think he sounds like our American pirate. One-L'd Bill has written in. Thank you for your letter. Now, just for context, Bill, with one L, sold up everything, excluding his wife, and I'm sure the other way around, to take a road trip, a life road trip, in an RV, to cross America and do what they've always wanted to do. I think it's an incredible adventure. It really is. Hello, Neil, says Bill, one-L'd Bill. Bill with one L. Today marks 214 days on the road since selling the house and going full-time in our RV. The anxiety associated with preparing for and then selling the house has faded to absolute zero since going nomad. We find this lifestyle well suited to our personalities at this particular period of our life. Slowing down has been absolutely brilliant. Pups has just gone into the river. There's a bit of algae in this river. It's not as clear as it usually is, Pups. I'm not sure you want to drink too much of that. He does like it, though. Do you like it? Is it cooling? While the southern end of Baja, now I'm going to have to get this right actually, Baja, California Sur is best known for Cabo San Lucas and San Jose del Cabo. Oh God, I know I've got this all wrong. We avoid these major tourist-influenced destinations in favour of Los Barriles, where we will stay for at least another 2 months. I appreciate that my L's and J's, by the way, are all in the wrong places. I never did get this right when I actually lived in Islas Canarias on Lanzarote many, many moons ago. My L's and J's, I was told, were always in the wrong place. Your pronunciation, Neil, does make you sound rather English, I know. This small coastal town, says one-eled Bill, is an excellent jumping-off point for exploring the southern peninsula with just the truck and tent, or sometimes in an Airbnb when you're treating yourselves. Since entering Mexico in mid-November, we found ways to experience the culture as far removed as possible from the mainstream tourist activities. Solo adventures in the truck for me, multi-day mule pack trips in the mountains for my wife, and a myriad of small villages found at the end of sometimes very challenging desert roads. All this deepens our love of Mexican culture and the Mexican people. The people we meet, both locals and travellers, have a deeper appreciation for life, friends and family. Gratitude is prevalent, and consumerism has been exchanged for experiences, relationship building, cultural understanding and resilience, or resiliency. I think you made a very good point there. Experience is going to be a really important part of I think this next chapter of my photographic life. The adventures that we're taking on this podcast are a part of that. Going to India, experience. As for your trip, Bill, where do I sign up? Postcards attached, he says, and these will be on the show page. Los Planos. Looking over Los Planos, we see agriculture and cactus forests mixed together and stretching back to the Sierra La Laguna mountains. In the upper third and right of centre is the small village of San Juan de los Planos. On this day, we decided to travel from Los Barriles to San Juan de los Planos. Are you doing this on purpose? And then over the mountain ranch to Boca del Alamo before returning to Los Barriles by the coast road. A meagre 22 kilometres. It took 2 hours and 20 minutes, though. At times, my wife stood on the road ahead and gave hand signals so I could navigate the worst obstacles, whilst at other times, I was out of the truck doing some landscaping to make a way forward. And then there's two pictures of Maria, together with her husband, who owns a small working rancho along the ranch road that connects San Javier and San Miguel de Comandú, where she raises goats and cows for personal use and some market sales. Every traveller is welcomed into their homes with a graciousness and kindness that bridges cultural and language gaps. Wish you were here. From Bill. Bill, I wish I was there. 1L Bill. I do. I found what you're talking about there, the way that people share their food, share their house, share their space, share stories. It's very much something that we came across in West Africa, in the Gambia. That feeling that everybody was welcome, and it's just wonderful. I mean, I live in a smaller town. It's not like I live in a city, but I certainly don't feel that kind of connection in the world that I frequent, Bill. So thank you for those, or thank you for that story, rather, and those pictures, which will be on the show page today. Right, there's a new assignment for this month, a newish assignment, because it's been running a couple of weeks. Let's take a moment to find out what that assignment for the month of May is.
The Photo Walk assignment.
And the assignment this time is being set by the winner of a previous assignment. It's almost like this stuff's planned, you know. Simon Blakesley, who made that incredible picture, and the wonderful story as well, I might add, Simon, about a lonely shopping basket just sitting in the snow on a lake in the Yukon, minding its own business. I don't know whether it was out bird watching or something. Who knows? So I think you're in a good position to set an assignment. But it's got nothing to do with frozen lakes, but it has got something to do with what you do as a living.
Yes, and as an aviation photographer, I've chosen the word flight for the assignment.
I like it.
I think that humans have always gazed skyward, captivated by flight. Your image could portray the role of flight, how it plays out in daily life. It might show the interplay between airplanes and wind and weather, or even the excitement generated by a flight to your favorite vacation destination. But I don't want people to be limited just by aircraft. So capturing birds or even fish that fly, or perhaps animals that take to the air. I think like a fox jumping up into the air and then descending down upon a vole to get its dinner. But I think there's another way that we can interpret flight too, and it's in more of an active sense. It could refer perhaps to that physiological human response to something frightening. The ability, for example, to take flight, getting away from something quickly, So I don't want to put any hard limits on this around aviation. So long as your image and your short write-up clearly transmits the specialness or relevance of flight, please feel free to explore and push the envelope.
I like the envelope because that's a very aviation word, isn't it, really?
Indeed.
I was thinking, Simon, I think this is a cracking idea, by the way, really I do. Flight can be so many things, as you've rightly pointed out. Rightly, right, brothers, rightly. See what I did there? But I was walking Barney earlier on, and we were walking, and it was the woodland part of this walk, and coming down out of a tree was a leaf, and it was just circling. It wasn't a sycamore, but it was just circling. That's a good example of flight, isn't it?
Yes, and I think there's another one, using it as a verb to flight something. It could be a shuttlecock. It could be a football, for example.
Yes.
I don't think that's necessarily an expression we use in Canada, but it's certainly one I recognize from my English roots. So when I was thinking about this, I thought there's also that too. So perhaps that gives space for people who'd like to bring in perhaps a sports tack to their photo or in their submission.
So we've got the word. The word for the assignment for the next month is simply
flight.
So good luck with the assignment flight, and think outside the envelope. That's a very flight word, isn't it? Don't necessarily think, as was suggested, of just aeroplanes and so on. Although, if you have a great picture that is of flight in that manner, please send that in. But good luck with that, and we'll announce a winner at the end of the month. It's the Photo Walk show. Just you, just me, our cameras, me with your letters. Taking as you can hear, we're by the river, taking a jaunt alongside the Kennet and Avon Canal today. This bit's a lot clearer. There were some parts further back where the locks have not been opened for months, partly due to the flooding problems that we had, and the locks weren't able to operate properly, which have now just built up algae, actually over a matter of days, if our local lakes are anything to go by. Let's have a quick letter from Arno Dimling. Oh, a great name, cracking name. One with a worrying level, though, of flattery. So I may have to go and hide behind the red sofa that I drag behind us each week. It's dried out a little over the last couple of weeks. It's not such a chore to drag around. First, says Arno, let me say that I thoroughly enjoy the Photo Walk, the Extra Mile, as well as the Fujicast. All the podcasts in one there that I present. I walk the beach each morning here on Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, in America land, and I love listening. Yesterday, while on a walk, I thought that it might be interesting to see what the rest of the world is seeing while you make your sketchbook photos. By that, says Arno, I mean that since we all listen at different times, in different time zones, and perhaps on different days, it'd be fun if you challenged your other listener to stop on cue when they hear you do so and take a photograph of whatever they're seeing at that exact moment that they're listening. Send in the photos and see what we're seeing at the same moment. Not necessarily to be done in every single show, but once in a while might be fun. My thought for what it's worth, and thank you for a great listening experience. Well now, Arno, we did actually used to do this. We did, and it was quite successful. It ran for, I don't know, half a year, maybe a year, and it sort of built quite a nice community feeling of, let's all make a picture at the same time. You show me where you are, and we got all sorts of stuff, including listeners that drive trucks across America who would make pictures, safely I assume, of that moment from a truck window. Things like that. Pictures in the dark, they were quite funny. I'm listening in the dark, here's a picture, and it was like one of those postcards, the comedy ones that you used to get, Blackpool at night, and it was just a black postcard. I think that joke's gone now, although I still see it sometimes on postcard or in postcard carousels. So yeah, we did do it. I think it's a good idea. Would you like to try that again? Yeah? Here comes another Pinstriped Express. Now, I could have made a photograph of that through this kind of vignetted bush and tree scene that I have here. I'm just looking through to the railway line, but that moment is gone. So I tell you what, this is what we used to do. I used to say, lift your camera. So let's try this together, please. All at the same time. In front of me, there's one of these small swing bridges on the canal. And I'm going to make a picture of that. 850 shutter speed, f5.6, 160 ISO, and here we go. I used to do a countdown, and you'd make a picture at the same time. Let's see if it works for Arno. 3, 2, 1. Picture made. Where were you in the world, and what were you making a picture of? And if we get some pictures from that, I'll pop them on the show page, of course. It being the second Friday of the month, it is the second, isn't it? We're not quite, we're quite racing away with the month. Street photographer and photography mentor Valerie Jardin is here with visual stories. This month, we are talking about, I love this as a subject to street photography. I'm a massive Elliot Erwitt fan. I would love to have spoken with Elliot. Sadly, I won't be able to now, of course. I would love to have spent some time talking with Elliot. I probably would have asked too many questions. There's all questions that he might have thought, oh, Neil, see, I'm going off on one of these imposter syndrome moments again. Oh, Neil, do we have to talk about the dogs? He'd have said. Or maybe not. Anyway, we're talking about dogs. It's a great subject for street photography, and that's what this month's Visual Stories is all about.
Dogs, we love them. I mean, I was going to say they're not always easy to photograph because they have a mind of their own, and sometimes they move out of frame when you're least expecting it. But they bring humour to many photographs. And I love pictures of dogs, particularly pictures of dogs with their owners. And I'm being very cautious to choose this as the first picture after I've just said that. It's the lady with the dog in the pushchair. The dog's the big white. It's a poodle, isn't it? Is it a standard poodle? I think it's a standard poodle.
I think it was, although we only see the head. But, they look like people, kind of. I think they have very much the same mannerism and expressions as people. And so this one was in a stroller or a baby buggy. Yeah. People tend to look like their dogs, or dogs look like their owners. And this is actually, I have bulldogs that look like their owners. I haven't included in this series. It's all about finding humor, seeing humor. And granted, this was shot a few years ago when you didn't see as many dogs in strollers. Now it's become a huge fad. I think originally people would put their dog in a stroller because it was an old dog or the dog had an injury, right? Yeah. But now it's every dog. I mean, at least in the United States, every other dog is in a stroller. I'm thinking within a few years, dogs, we probably won't know how to walk because they're in strollers all the time. I don't know if you have that in the UK, but
absolutely
I see it in France as well.
No, we don't have that. Well, we do have it in the UK, but it's not an epidemic.
It's coming. It's coming because in the US, people. Well, I think it's all about selling products. People spend more money on their dogs usually than they do on themselves or on their kids. So they're easy targets. So every new product, every new fad, people have dogs in strollers. And I often ask when I see dogs in strollers, I'm like, what's wrong with them? And usually say, oh, they like it. I think a dog prefers to walk. I'm sorry, but if I put my Luna in a stroller, she would jump right off. There is no way she would sit. Yeah. So this was kind of new to me because that was shot a few years ago in France, actually. And so it was kind of new, and seeing a standard poodle in a stroller was very unusual. So I saw the humor in it as the similar hairdo of the owner.
Well, there's a triptych next, which has humor. A very grumpy looking dog with one of the. Do you know what they're called in? What's it called? Life of Pets. Oh, Secret Life of Pets. It's called the cone.
The cone of shame.
The cone of shame. Yes. And here he is, sat with his cone of shame, with his little buddy next to him that hasn't got to wear the cone of shame. But you've made a triptych, and of course, this is audio, so you're going to have to explain what went on here. There's 3 pictures, and I wonder, last one's very, very cheeky, but I wonder what the thought process was behind it.
Well, I was in this amazing cafe near the Canal Saint-Martin in Paris with a friend, and probably a regular was sitting at the bar, and then his 2 dogs, one, the big one, in a cone of shame, and the little one, kind of a Jack Russell, free as could be. And so the first one, you know how that look of dogs when they have to wear that cone, they look so miserable.
I know.
Even if they're not, but this dog was obviously not having the time of his life. And then the second one, which I think is hilarious, is the little dog is just scratching away his neck, which, the big dog can't do because he's wearing that cone. And the third one, we see the butt of the little dog, and then that other big dog still looking at me inside of his cone. And I thought there was so much humor there, and I just love the tile floor of the old cafe and everything. It's just everything kind of came together, and those are actually probably on my top 5 favorite dog pictures I've ever taken, and I've had the dog series for many, many years. Yeah. And then it became a book.
I was thinking with making pictures of dogs, that you don't get the same street issues that you can get when you're photographing people. People generally are really, really happy for you to make pictures of their dogs.
And actually on workshop, when people are a little shy or they want to do street portraits where they actually have an interaction and they do a portrait of a person, I always go for the dog owner. Yeah. So start with the dog and then move your way up and then, do a portrait of the 2 of them. Yeah. Rarely will they say no. And for sure, they will love to have their dog photographed. So they're usually your number 1 target. I've never seen anyone being rejected by a dog owner for a picture. They're usually very, very accommodating and very proud, especially in France. Because, France is definitely number 1 dog country in the world, and people are really, really, really proud of their dogs.
Although I can't believe they're putting them in strollers. A friend of mine, Mandy Burton, her dog series comes to mind now, and because you mentioned confidence, that's why I'm remembering her, is that she made pictures of, now what did she call it? It wasn't dogs and their owners. I think it was dogs and the humans they own, or something like that.
Probably something like that.
I think it works like that, where she would go for portraits of people that were walking their dogs I think for Mandy, it was a really good way of interacting with humans, because when you start to talk to humans about their dogs, it's a whole new world, isn't it? You know this because you've got Luna and I've got Barney. We talk, don't we?
Absolutely. There's something so good about having a dog. I mean, a pet in general, but I think a dog gets you out and walking. A dog gets you to interact with other people. If you have a cute dog like my Luna, everybody wants to talk to me and ask, what kind of dog is this? Because she's a super mutt. And so it really, the interactions are endless.
And dogs don't have bad sides. They're never going to turn around to you and say, listen, could you do it from the left? I'm not happy with the right hand side of my face. Well, before we have another picture, I've got a question that's come in. We're doing a question a month. If you'd like to ask Valerie a question, anything about street photography, then please do it via the email address, which is stories@photowalk.show, or indeed on the post on the Facebook page. Andrew Higgins says, Valerie, can you think of any styles of street photo that have become overdone or too copied? I'm thinking of the striding person, which Andrew says is overdone, and in-your-face flash, which Gilden and Parr did first and better, Andrew's words. I look at the almost daily posts of Paris Life by David Turnley, and they're beautiful documentary street photos, timeless, no strides and no flash. What do you think, though?
Yeah, he's right. I mean, I think people tend to gravitate towards a certain genre or style. One, because maybe they like the look and they want to try it.
Yeah.
or because they think it's the popular thing to do, which is, to me, is the wrong approach. Again, it's always good to remind yourself that you're the only person you need to please, and so you should not shoot for an audience. To me, street photography is really capturing simple moments of everyday life without a plan, unless you're working on an assignment. It's reacting to moments, to the emotion of daily moments, and that's what I love to do. That's the only type of photography that brings me joy. I really do think that people need to find their own voice, and as long as they try to, I wouldn't say copy, but emulate somebody else's style, they're gonna get stuck. They need to go past that and find their own voice. And really, when it comes down to it, is what do you photograph that brings you the most joy? Doesn't matter if it gets the likes. See, those are two separate things, but often they kind of get mixed. And so otherwise, I'd be photographing beautiful silhouettes of people walking down the streets all day long and posting that because I know that will get more likes, where it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it's usually easier to do than capturing the true emotion of a daily scene. And so the timeless part, I can see that. I know David's work, and he's in Paris, and I know when I'm in Paris, I tend to see timeless moments all the time as well. So the timeless, yes, that adds a certain mood to the photograph as well. So really, just do whatever makes you happy.
I was going to proffer three things that I think are done a lot, not overdone necessarily. Silhouettes you mentioned, but I love them, you see, and Sean Tucker's silhouettes, I absolutely adore them. And then neon is done so much, but then I love them. And Mr. Whisper's neon stuff I absolutely adore. And then the bus stuff late at night, I think, oh, another bus one, but I love those too. And I think of Nick Turpin's On the Night Bus series. So I don't know, as long as you create your own voice of stuff that might even be quite familiar, I'm with you. I think it's about creating your own voice. People
say the same thing about umbrellas, and who is not drawn to umbrellas? Yeah. I have an umbrella series, and a good umbrella picture is a good umbrella picture. Why say, oh, that's too cliche, it's been overdone? Well, no one has done it like you. Just do whatever brings you joy when it comes down to it. What else matters?
Absolutely. Right. Back to a dog picture that I adore. This little chappie, I want to take him home. If I was in Havana, I would. It's a portrait of, I think this is what we would call a Heinz 57. It's a breed of many, I think. And he's just sat there. He's sat down. But it's the scene behind. See, what is great about this? It's a picture about a dog, but it's a picture that's got context. It's a picture about a scene. It's a picture about a city. It's a picture about movement, all in one photograph. That's what I'm seeing anyway.
And it will break your heart. There are a lot of dogs that really could use a lot of love on the streets of Havana. However, this little guy seemed pretty happy. He definitely owned the street. He's in the middle of the street, actually. And a lot of people go to Havana, and it's all about the colors and the old cars. But quite a few years ago, Havana was quite a bit different than it is today. But I did not want to come back with colorful pictures of old cars. That's the one thing that...
See, we're back to cliches, aren't we?
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, we're back to cliches.
Well, the thing is, I wanted to... Because that's not Havana. If all you see is the historical district of Havana, that is not Havana. It's like going to the Champs-Élysées in Paris. That is not Paris. First of all, you won't really see, many locals. Or if you go to Café Flore in Paris... no word of French is ever spoken there. So, there is the part that they want the tourists to see. And then, of course, that part of Havana with the old cars and the people, the old lady smoking a cigar and everything. Okay, everybody's done that. That's not the Havana I wanted to see. I wanted to see the real Havana. But I did walk through this district, and this is where I was, actually, and this little dog was in the middle of the street. So I focused on him, and he's definitely center staged here. But then we have a hint of the life in Havana. The old car is there. Yeah. And then, life on the streets out of focus in the background. Yeah. So to me, that's one of my favorite shots of Havana, because that is Havana.
Well, that's Havana in one picture. That is Havana in one picture. Yeah. It really is. It's beautiful.
And not a postcard.
No.
It's really about seeing outside the postcard. And when I travel, I don't want to make postcard shots. Why? I mean, then I might as well just buy them and save myself time if I'm going to come back with pictures that look like postcards. So I totally resist that and try to find authenticity. And I think as street photographers, when we travel, that's what we look for. That's totally my type of travel photography right there.
And my thanks to Valerie Jardin, who returns in the Extra Mile today for an extra couple of learnings and pictures. The Extra Mile is I'll explain it again at the end of the show, but it's our Patreon show where I do an extra program for you every single week. It's another photo walk. We have a mailbag, and we have, often the guests for the Extra Mile are extra milers, so you get to hear about each other in the community. And I think I often talk about how I believe there's a real, I'm going to use a corporate expression now, I might start to break out in a sweat, but I often talk about how there's a USP to this program, this podcast, this photo walk show that we do. I think, I've not found anything else like it. My other listeners now is going to go off and scramble a search together just to prove that there is something else like it. But no, I think the Extra Mile has a similar sort of USP in that we do much of the same, not always, but the Extra Milers are the stars of that particular program, and we have extra parts from guests that we talk with, such as Valerie, and guests that appear on the show, extra stories from them, if you like, when the tape stopped rolling, that kind of thing. Final letter to the show for today. This one is from Dan Langer. It's going to get quite noisy here because we're walking past a weir, fast-flowing weir, and then a lock that looks like the doors at the other end have been left slightly ajar, which is not the way you're supposed to work. Come on, pups. That's a weir. I'm not jumping in there. Usually, they like the doors, both ends of a lock, to be closed. Right, let's go past this bit, pups. Final letter to the show today is from Dan Langer, who, in a wonderful twist of planning, he says, he's not himself on the Extra Mile today, but his sister is, Patricia. Hello, Neil. A letter from Canada. I've been following your show for a little over a year now after intense encouragement from my sister, Patricia. She gave me a camera about 2 years ago, and now she's been coaching, critiquing and nourishing, I like that, my photographic development. I do a regular walk myself with my own version of Sabarkalot called Fergus. Fergus is a young golden retriever, and we're lucky to have easy access to a stretch of the Trans-Canada Trail, which meanders between farm fields. Sounds glorious. I walk the trail. Fergus visits the trail after following the various scents that often lead him into stinky mischief. Oh, your one does that as well, does he? I thought we had the only one that did that. Showers daily, it seems. This walk is generally about an hour in length, so I usually need 2 days to get through the average episode. There's a lot of trains today. Pardon me, Dan, whilst I let that pinstriped express go past. We've sort of meandered our way closer to the railway tracks now. But you know me, I like to leave those in as well. A very circuitous route, says Dan, to tell you about my tree picture. We do love a good tree picture, Dan. When returning home from a few weeks in Georgia last winter, I took a side trip to visit the Antietam Civil War battlefield. Antietam has the dubious distinction of being the bloodiest single-day battle of the American Civil War. This tree is known as the Witness Tree. It stands beside a bridge that was built in 1836, and this sumac tree sprouted up shortly thereafter. It had matured by September of 1862 when Union General Ambrose Burnside led his forces over the bridge and took the overlooking ridge, which turned the flank of the Confederate troops and turned the tide of the battle. The bridge is now called Burnside Bridge. Almost 160 years after the battle, this tree still stands, and the National Parks Development takes special precautions to protect and preserve it. I took a number of photos of the tree, but still don't feel that they do the tree or the scene justice. I was struck by how this noble tree stood there while thousands of Americans were wounded and killed to take the bridge and cross the creek. The carnage and devastation that are typical of Civil War battle sites left little intact. Yet this tree, which is now almost 200 years old, survived. If only it could talk. Yeah, imagine the stories, Dan. There are some fascinating films about this battle. As a Brit, it's not history that I learned at school. So actually delving down a rabbit hole of films and articles was, I say a pleasure, but of course it was a bloody battle, wasn't it? It really was. But I've certainly learned a lot about this. And there's a building as well as a tree. Well, the bridge actually was, I think that was rebuilt, wasn't it? Anyway, the church, Dunker Church, that is in some of the very old photographs from that time, and it was rebuilt reasonably recently, 1960s. That's not recent, Neil. Well, it feels recent to me. Anyway, thank you for your story, Dan. I'll put the picture. It's coming a little bit small, and hopefully in the meantime I'd have got in touch with Dan and been able to organise a larger resolution image, but it's still important to have on the show page, so I'm going to put it on there. If you go to the show page today for this particular episode, and if you'd like to send in your letters of where you're visiting, where you've been, the email address, just like what Dan used, is stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide. It's not the long side, it's the width. That's the important thing. 2,500 pixels wide at least, please, if you can manage. And if you do send in a full resolution picture that you can't optimize because you don't have the software necessarily, don't worry, I will do that heavy lifting. All right, back to Al Brydon for the final part of our conversation today.
Based on a full story is another one that has a sort of finite end in some ways. You found 20 rolls of film in a drawer. I like this idea.
Yeah.
You'd forgotten about them, but they were there. They were in a drawer.
Yeah.
They'd been exposed 15 years or so ago. You went about re-exposing them to make work that connected with the time they'd been made to now.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that concept.
I just like the idea, I suppose. It was supposed to be a collaboration with my past self. I'd had these films, literally in this drawer. I must have moved house like 7 times and been in this drawer for such a long time. And so I couldn't remember what was on them, obviously. It was such a long time ago. So I had no idea. And I really, really like that. This idea of photographs in potential, they were on there. And I thought I could just go and get them developed. And I would have a series of mediocre photographs, most likely. But I wanted to go out and re-expose them. I thought that would be, I don't quite remember exactly why I thought that would be a good idea or if it would even be an interesting idea. But my dad had given me this fantastic, like 90s point and shoot camera with, the immense zoom that all fathers in the 90s had to have. This zoom. It was all about the zoom, So I remember my dad liked zoom. So he gave me this camera. And it was nice. It was nice in a way because it was, he almost in that act became part of it. And it was just, again, it was really quite freeing because I could just go out and react to things. Because I had no preconception of what was on the films anyway. I could just go and make work. I could just photograph of whatever I wanted and allow the serendipity, allow the chance of whatever else was on there to just let the work happen. It was really, really passive in a way. But I would imagine walking with my sort of self 15 years younger, and I would have no doubt thought I was an utter moron at the time as well, because most 20-year-olds do tend to be a little bit like that. I was, at least. I'm not saying all 20-year-olds are idiots, but I wondered what I would say to that person. What would I talk about, and what would he think about me? Because at 20 years old, but maybe you think about yourself when you're older, but you're not thinking about the future particularly. Or at least I wasn't. I was thinking about what's going to happen today. I'll live forever. It doesn't matter. But then with 15 years or 20 years or whatever arbitrary amount of time. Yeah, it was just making that connection with that past guy who trying to remember who he was. I know he's still in there somewhere.
But back to the reservoir. Now, I'm fascinated by the reservoirs in this country that are in places that were once villages. That fascinates me, where whole communities were moved out to make way for huge, mainly I think drinking water reservoirs, like Haweswater. There's Mardale Green. I had to look this up. Measand. I think it's called Measand. Anyway, they were flooded to create this huge underground aqueduct. And I remember going there with a friend a couple of years back, a late friend, sadly, of the show, Neil Zarmelinks. And he took great pleasure in showing me this. He said, "You must see this, because you're starting to see some of the buildings appear." So it's sort of horrific all at the same time, because, of course, they shouldn't be appearing. There should be a reservoir. Yeah. But you've been photographing this as a series.
It was quite a short sort of series, really. It was probably around the same time you and your friends. It was that really hot summer, but there was one particularly hot summer where there was a reservoir near me in the Peak District. Yeah. Derwent Reservoir.
Derwent, that's quite famous for it. Yeah.
Well, there's a remnants of a village underneath that. But I'd gone back there. I'd seen it low before, but I'd never seen it as low as it got. It was frankly astonishing. I've never seen anything like it. And what was revealed was absolutely incredible. And I struggle in summer to make work. Summer's a bit too bright, a little bit too hot, and it's maybe very, very busy, especially where I sort of find myself making work. And this was really good because I was able to go out in the morning, maybe for a few hours before it got too hot, and I could just walk around this reservoir. There's three of them in a row, and you can, and there's structures in between, not just structures I photographed. I mean, I like the shapes and things that were left as the water receded, the patterns and the textures that were revealed. So it was nothing too serious. It was just a way for me to spend the summer. But also, like I do, I sort of got to thinking about it, what these things meant, and also the finite amount of time I had, because then obviously these would be, come winter, you wouldn't be able to see them anymore. I like this landscape, this temporary landscape was revealed, and I thought I've got to go and make work of it, but then it became something about it in a sort of sense. Because there were the dry stone walls, and I imagined the conversations people must have had while they were making these things, or the trees, the remnants of these trees that had obviously been chopped down. You can still see the axe marks. And obviously there are buildings there, but I was more interested in the minutiae, the details. I'd find old bits of clay pipe, the pipes you smoke, little trinkets that someone dropped maybe 100 years ago. And again, it's that picking it up, and that sudden connection with that person who dropped it really fascinated me. So it was about trying to make a connection with people who were no longer there, I suppose. I don't think the photographs are very good, but I enjoyed doing it, and I liked the idea behind it much more than the images I actually made. I liked the potential, the one-way connection, between me and someone who could sort of no longer speak for themselves. It's a little gift from them to me, and then vice versa back.
Well, one that did become a book, and maybe you can elaborate on how important books are to you as well as a photographer. I don't find too many on my walks, but I do happen to take a walk through churchyards on some of my treks, and if I do visit a graveyard, I can spend a long time just looking at tombstones and the words on them. I've made quite a few pictures in graveyards, pictures that will probably never be shared, and headstones do fascinate me. I remember finding Richard Adams, the author's grave, the man who wrote Watership Down.
Fantastic.
I found that. It was in a graveyard during a commercial photo shoot of all things. I was photographing a landscape company whose job it was to just keep the weeds and grasses at bay. And I found this tombstone, and I was really sort of taken by the small rabbit motif on the stone, and a bit upset that a bird had actually done something on the gravestone. I found myself but I went back to the car. I got some wet wipes out of the car. And went back and cleaned his tombstone.
No, I appreciate that. I'm sure.
I hope he
nice
would.
Thing to do.
But your project, Graveyard Bins, another one where I thought, inspired, and I genuinely mean that because
sweet of you, man.
Because it's something I would never have considered making. What you saw, I don't know, but you made it.
Well, I suppose we all see things that are invisible to someone else, I guess. That's the 99% of the world is going to see something invisible that I just can't grasp. They just happen to be there. I just found them interesting things to look at, I guess. Like anything, any body of work, as we sort of mentioned before, just starts off by perhaps playing, just by doing it, just by noticing something that maybe someone else just hasn't noticed. These are all made with a mobile phone,
right.
It was a really old Nokia. Nokia had these mobile phones that were really terrible phones, useless. It was like a Windows phone. It was absolutely useless. But the camera on it was the business. It was really, I like the camera. It wasn't, you couldn't print them big, but there's just something about them. It had this really sort of painterly quality about it.
That's what I thought.
So I just started photographing when I walked my boy to school in the morning, and we'd always walk through the graveyard. And I'd send him scurrying off, go and look in the bins for me, And he'd scuttle off and say, Dad, come on, look at this one. So I'd sort of run over. But it was interesting because the council would obviously let them get so high, and then they would empty them. So there was always a fresh I was always waiting for this next sort of batch of
these
flowers.
Are the floral tributes that are collected and then thrown away.
But amongst other general detritus, it's a public space, so people are going to throw everything in the bin, water bottles and all sorts. But after a while, obviously, flowers on graves become less fresh, and I just became interested, I suppose, in that moment with. When does a bouquet of flowers left for a loved one become not worthy of that remembrance, that strange ritual that we do? And then I kind of thought about maybe it's like when the flowers are removed from the grave and placed in the bins. It was the idea that came to mind. It was like the dead giving those flowers back, flowers from the dead to the living, and then they were placed in these receptacles, which was the graveyard's graveyard. What I sort of saw them as. It was a fantastic thing to do, and I think, as we discussed just before we hit the red button, as you say, they were never meant to be anything. I suppose anything I start is never meant to be anything.
Well, I think they surprised you. I mean, you made them, discarded them for a couple of years, and then posted a couple.
I just kept going with them. I worked on and off on that for about 6 years, but I just kept it at the back of my mind. Obviously, I always had my phone on me, and it was no bother just to scuttle over to one or send the boy off to one and go and look into them. It was, when they became sort of more and more and more, these bins would get more and more full, and you would have these tableaus. They were like still life. So I just absolutely fell in love with photographing them. It was just such wondrous things. And then it was the idea behind it. And of course, then these bins were emptied, and then they would then subsequently go off to the graveyard, and then they would naturally decay. But it kind of made sense to me, that I always thought the flowers were trying to teach me something. The fact they were there, they're there for a reason. They're there to they showed me something, I suppose. But again, more death, more fun, more endings.
Well, no, it became a book.
It did become a book. Yeah, it's
and you've published a good few books now.
I'm very privileged to do so. It's been I think books are a bit more of a realistic vehicle for me in terms of showing work. You know, I have exhibited before quite a few times, but I mean, exhibiting is great, but it's work on a wall. It's there for 6 weeks, then it's down again. You know, a book's a portable object that you can get off your shelf. You can take somewhere. You can show someone else. They can pick it up and look at it again and again and again.
Well, all the books behind me, that's exactly what
I yeah. There's plenty. I've got shelves of things behind me here.
A good few shelves full of yours.
Yeah.
Panther Puncher.
Oh, yeah.
A 14 minutes film on your website.
Oh, crikey, yeah.
Which is like a landscape of meditation. Long cuts of nature, just being nature. Ian Murdoch is the musician who wrote the soundtrack.
Ian's great.
It. And it's a very meditative experience. It's not necessarily going to be one of those big YouTube hitters.
Oh, crikey, no.
But that's not what you designed it for.
No, it's never meant. YouTube was a place to share it.
Tell me about the film, though, because I will leave a link for it. Watch it and be prepared for meditation, because that's the way I feel about it.
Yeah, I'm not a video. I don't work in video, but my camera at the time had a function and I thought, why don't I'll just start making these little clips, these 30-second. I wanted to make photographs that moved slightly. You know, they're not. That's why they're static. They're not panning, and I'm not zooming in or zooming out. It's just setting the camera up, allowing these 30-second clips to sort of happen. You know, I mean, sometimes there's no movement at all. You probably, some of them you can't even tell.
Well, I thought, is this a still or this?
Yeah.
Oh no,
they're all moving in.
Yeah.
They're all video. I can't say, you know, on some days things moved and other days things didn't. I wasn't particularly worried about that. Yeah. It was I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theory nut job now, but I had this experience. It was the reason it's called Panther Punch. I had this very strange experience. And have you heard of like alien big cats? You know, this idea that we have panthers running around the UK.
Yes, I have. Yeah,
you know, so people, Dartmoor's a prime,
and everybody talks about the Beast of Bodmin, and
that's right. Yeah. So I had this very strange experience one night outside of a pub in the Peak District. Right. And it was very, very late. It was about 11 o'clock, and I'd just been out making work with one of my friends, and I was stood outside in the car park with this very, very black car park, very dark car park. Yeah. And on the car park just sort of backs out onto the moorland. And in the middle of this car park, there's this one street light, and it just casts a very, very soft, you know, light, maybe about 2 or 3 meters across. And obviously then it fades quite naturally out into darkness. Yeah. And I saw this really strange looking animal just sort of crouching down on the floor. Now, I don't know exactly what it is I saw. It looked to me, for all intents and purposes, like a large, really, really large black cat. Yeah. Now, I've, as we sort of perhaps mentioned before, I've taken enough sort of hallucinogens in my time to you know, at least understand that my eyes are probably quite, you know, our eyes are liars. But it was that thing that sort of sparked off. Now, I'm not saying there's alien big cats, and I'm not saying what I saw was an alien big cat. I just saw something strange, and I liked the idea of that. You know, it kind of got me in mind of sort of the folklore. Now, a lot of people have said they've seen these animals. Now, people are obviously seeing something or think they're seeing something, and I just wondered, it's become folklore, and I like the idea of folklore, and so I started making this work about thinking about all the folklore that's been lost over the hundreds and hundreds of years. You know, all the stories that sort of don't get told anymore, and because there's no one left to tell them, there's no one left to remember them. All these sort of old gods buried in the hedgerows that, you know, they were sort of, they're still there in a way, you know, and all these stories are still there. And Panther Punch was an attempt, I suppose, in a way, to make sense of those. No, I can never hear these stories and I can never know them, but it was my idea, my sort of my way of trying to get the idea of these stories manifest in. That was the premise sort of behind it. Now
you say it. Now I'm thinking about some of the scenes. They are very ethereal, actually, particularly. Sure. I mean, because they're not in sequence necessarily. You go from. In season sequence, I mean, because right in the middle there's a wonderful sort of light snow scene.
Oh yeah,
and it's a film that you must go and see. I have a question that I ask at the end of nearly every single interview now.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely fascinated to hear what you're going to say to this.
Lay it on me, Neil.
Oh, it's a very, very simple one, Al. Well, not necessarily, I suppose.
No,
some people
I suspect it's not going to be simple.
Pontificated over this one for a while. What is your why?
That's a really hard question. I think my why is to make work that I love and make work that I want to see. Because if I don't fall in love with my work, then how can I expect anyone else to? I always feel like I'm in the wrong place, but maybe at the right time. When I'm making work, I never quite fit in. All the work's kind of awkward. I'm kind of awkward, I always think. That's my why, yeah.
And my sincere thanks to Al Brydon for talking with me today on the Photo Walk. It was a real privilege to chat with you, Al. I've been a follower of your work for some time. I think I understand more about it than when I started the conversation anyway with you. So thank you for your time. And that's it for this week. But there is more, Neil, more, he says, in an Oliver Twist-like fashion. Yes. If you're new around here and you can't wait until next Friday and you'd like to walk a bit further together, then the Extra Mile Edition 432 is waiting for you on our Patreon channel, which has well over 200 extra posts, mainly sound stuff. You can even hear the podcasts of the Extra Mile on your regular app. There's instructions on how to do that when you join as a member of Patreon. Best way to find a way to support this show and become an extra miler is to go to the website, photowalk.show, look for the orange button that says support the show, top right hand corner, yellowy, orangey yellow button. And on this particular edition, I will be talking with extra miler Patricia Langer about her experiences of making exhibition work over many years. Plus, Valerie is back for just a couple more visual stories about dogs.
On this week's Extra Mile,
I walked in and I thought, this is amazing. People can come together and look at everything and you can talk to them, right? You can't sit beside a person looking at your book, but you can talk to people. Yeah. And so I went back. I was naive then. I didn't think about what are the protocols about approaching a gallery. I just opened the door, went in and said, who do I talk to? Doing what is your genuine, authentic thing is healing. It heals psychologically, emotionally, and it's not about doing deep analysis on yourself. It's about giving over to the desire to express.
Our PS, the postscript, the final thoughts to the show is to come. But before that, we need a play-out song. The song that we make just a few final frames to. And think about what's been said today. And it's from Anthony Lazzaro. Now, I thought I needed something that was quite dreamy, quite summery. So I do apologise immediately, by the way, if you are not necessarily on a walk at the moment or looking out your window onto a summery, sunny scene. You might be thinking, well, that's all very well for you, Neil, but it's not quite doing that here. So you might have to, well, maybe this can be audio sunshine for you. Go with me on that particular one. It's a favourite voice of mine, this artist. I just love this sort of, I don't know, almost this jazz-like drawl. Oh, I'm not sure if that's a phrase that Anthony Lazzaro would like, but I think that's what this is. It's called Drop of Summertime. It's very dreamy, this particular one. We're on a riverbank, you and I, with a picnic blanket out, just having a chat about making photographs. Yeah, I think that's the mood of this particular song.
You look outside and give a yell. It's just another boring dawn. The sky looks gray on neighbors bound the floor. Your days are feeling just the same for real the time you've been off your game. Don't care to play young cat to keep us cold. I don't know if your soul's feeling old, if your heart's growing cold. You just need the drop of summertime. And you know, if your day feels too long, you just need a tiny song. Take a make the endless house goodbye. And I know a song, just a quick fix. The secret sauce in your mix. If you don't believe me, listen to the song. And you know, if your soul is feeling old, if your heart is growing cold, you just need to drop of summertime. And you know, if your day feels too long, you just need a tiny song that can make those endless hours go by. No. If your soul's feeling whole, if your heart is growing cold, you just need a drop of summertime. And you know, if your day feels too long, you just need a tiny song that can make us endless hours go by.
That's Anthony Lazzaro, our play-out song for today. I've started putting information about the songs, the artists that you hear on the show page. So everything will be on that show page. Go to it via photowalk.show. Just a few closing thoughts before the postscript. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. My promise to you is to keep building this wonderful community, and it really is, I think, of kindness in the photographic and walking world, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we do, photography and walking. Now, if you could help me, this really is an Oliver Twist moment, hands outstretched, more, you want more? On the show page, there are some handy buttons that help you share the show. They're underneath the player, but also be sure to press that follow or subscribe button on your podcast app so I can be sure to let you know whenever there's a new episode out. And if you know somebody who might like to walk with us, just drop them a message. Let them know. Or indeed use those share buttons that I've just mentioned. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT. Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram. You can hear now we're just returning to the world of noise. It's a bit more industrial, as you can probably hear in the background. My thanks to Andrea Gilpin, yes, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members. Right, a postscript for the show. I was really trying to look for something that went with Al Brydon's take on life behind a camera. That inquisition that he has for the stuff of nature, of being in the landscape, of marking time, really. And I think you could apply this postscript as much to photography as you can to what it was written about and for, which is painting. Although I know you're a proper talented bunch, we have a few painters within our midst, we do. Anyway, the postscript today is from Pablo Picasso, who said, "Painting is just another way of keeping a diary."
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.